But
Paste it on.
underneath, that way nobody accidentally turns it
Yeah.
off.
Testing. It sounds like it's working. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Mac Wade, the Executive Director for the Port of Morgan City, and really want to thank everybody for coming out today. It's a good turnout. I think the last 2 years we had to do it virtual, but this is the first time we've had to do it in person in about 2 years, but it's a good turnout today. So I want to thank everybody for coming out. And I tell you what, we're going to start off with Pledge of Allegiance. Congressman, Captain, would you mind leading us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. If y'all can remain standing just 1 second, just do a quick prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for giving us a day to come together. We pray for wisdom. We pray for guidance. We pray for directions. We conduct the port's business today and the community's business. And we thank our men and women in uniform around the world that give us this opportunity to be here today. And all these things we ask in your name. Amen. I can be seated. And it is a pleasure being here today, and it's great to have our congressman out of the 3rd District here with us today, Captain Clay Higgins, who's a very dear friend of Morgan City, this whole area down here. So, Clay, we really want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. And, Clay, I don't know who, so many people here. Could you introduce who you brought with you today, if you don't mind?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I have Colonel Greg Ellison out of my Lafayette office. The Colonel is retired Army combat commander, a gentleman of distinguished accomplishment in the oil and gas field as well, retired his business there. And the Colonel and I met on the campaign trail in 2016. Two patriots driven to serve, and here we are serving together out of our common office. I'm in a room full of bosses right now, and I have 755,000 constituents, and this is a room full that I care deeply about. So I thank the Colonel for being part of our mission and being with me today. I have Christian Gill, who's been a right-hand man and a counselor and advisor for many, many years since the beginning. So that's who my staff that's with me today. God bless y'all. I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Matt.
Congressman, thank you very much, sir. I'm going to introduce a few more people, and y'all please forgive me if I don't get everybody in this. This is a room full of all special people that showed up today, but just wanted to, Senator Kennedy's office, I don't know if Sarah's here yet, but she is was planning on coming. She's going to be here with Senator Kennedy's office, and she has 2 or 3 staffers, I think, out of the D.C. office with her. Also, we have Lauren Casanova with Senator Cassidy's office on her way. So they're not here yet, but they will be. So we do appreciate all the support we get out of Washington, D.C. Clay, you got anything? Would you, Clay, I'm sorry, you got anything else that you want to add right now, or?
So I have 6 sisters. My tendency to just say yes, ma'am. So I'll avail myself to any questions that be on the top of your mind right now for just a couple of minutes before we get into the essence of our meeting here today. Good lady, do you have a question you'd like for me to address?
I'm just happy that
Yeah, you know, some of us, you know, we don't take kindly to oppression of our individual rights and freedoms, and when that's presented to us, we all had to sort of measure how we responded to that. And as a constitutionalist, I support your right to choose for what's best in you and your family, and that would include your medical decisions. That would include vaccinations and masking, etc. It's called freedom. Do what you want. And you know, where I had a problem was when you had government forcing us to make decisions that we perhaps didn't concur with for ourselves and our family. Flying was an interesting intersection there. You know, I had to, my duty to serve required me to travel. And, you know, I know Lee Dragner got his own private jet and everything, but I don't have access to that jet. I got to fly Delta, United, American, etc. So those airlines, you put me on one of those SpaceX jets and just drop me halo into D.C., Lee. But I had to fly commercial. You had no choice. And those airlines had developed their rules, had to wear a mask. So every weekend I fly home. I go to D.C. to serve, and I return home because this is where I live. I don't have a place there. I stay in my office. So every week I had to make a decision. Am I going to comply with this mask ruling to get on this airplane? And the answer was yes, because it's my oath to serve you was greater than my desire to stand and say, no, I'm not complying with that. I mean, it was a mask. It's not a vaccine. You understand? It's something. It's a like part of the required attire to access the aircraft. So I determined I would comply with that, but I'm very glad to see those mandates gone. Not to even get into whether you agree or disagree with the science behind the mask or whatever. But as Americans, we owe it to, Ronald Reagan said, America's only one generation away from losing its rights and freedoms. This is not something that's bestowed upon us, that's in our DNA. We have to continually fight for our rights and freedoms, and we have to acknowledge and stand up when we feel that those individual rights and freedoms are threatened. And in a small way, you know, we've made those decisions, each and every one of us, over the course of the last couple of years, sometimes in very big ways. I lost my father-in-law, dear man, very healthy, killed by COVID. My wife's father died on December the 12th of 2020. Well, what was incredibly injurious to our family was that we couldn't be with him and hold his hand in the hospital. I mean, for God's sake, is that where we've come as a country? That the government is going to tell us that we can't hold our loved one's hand in the hospital as they pass? When have we ever thought we'd have that conversation? Millions of American families did face that, and mine was one. It was wrong on every level that my wife was not able to hold her father's hand when he passed. That her mother would lose her husband of 40-plus years and not be able to hold that man's hand when he passed. So America has suffered for 2 years, not just from the Communist Chinese Party virus that was thrust upon the world, but because of the way governments responded, including our own, to local, state, and federal level. So it was a vibrant debate. Boy, you had to start with that question, didn't you, Boo?
I'm so sorry.
It's a vibrant debate, but no matter what side of the debate you're on, we have survived that as a nation. And as we reflect upon what happened, you know, I'm prayerful that we emerge better, stronger, more resilient. I'll take one more question, and I'm going to sit down and listen, which is why I'm here.
We'll be able to acquire gas in our country in order to run these generators. Any progress with that?
You're talking about purchasing American energy product for American energy consumption? Well, I may be the loudest voice in support of that policy in D.C. The problem is, you know, we have an executive branch that disagrees, and they have executive authority according to the founder's intent by division of our branches of government. Article 1 is a legislative branch. That's our bicameral, bipartisan Congress, House of Representatives, and the Senate. Article 2 is the executive branch. The President of the United States, our Commander-in-Chief, has broad executive authorities as intended by our founders. And then Article 3 is our judicial branch, wherein balance is maintained between the three branches. That's the strength of our republic. So we're suffering through an executive branch that I largely disagree with. And yet, as a constitutionalist, I support, you know, his executive authority, even when it's injurious to our country. I support the system, you understand, but I oppose the policy that's coming out of that system. So our energy policy, you need look no further than to see that our own White House is by some of its policies, is injuring our country. American energy should 100% provide American energy consumption. There's nowhere is it performed cleaner. The exploration, extraction, production. How you doing, Rev? My good friend, the Reverend, just sat down. Our transport, exporting. We should be exporting clean, affordable, efficient LNG across the world. Good for the planet. It's great for America. And, you know, but they'll do things like pull, you know, 30 million barrels of oil a month out of our strategic petroleum reserve. That stuff shouldn't be touched until it's really needed for the purposes it was intended for. 30 million barrels a day, that's a day and a half of consumption for America. We burn 20 million barrels a day in America. Well, you're 30 million barrels a month you're going to pull out of strategic petroleum reserves. Obviously, that's a political maneuver to put out there, you know, for the masses that can't quite get past the headline, and they could give a little golf clap on, yay, you know, the president's doing something. 30 million barrels a day. Anyway, there's a lot of politics happening out of our White House that impacts energy here in America, and the millions of Americans that have direct reliance upon access to affordable, abundant, clean energy, American energy. And the world, as you see, can be manipulated into incredible conflict and war if energy is used as a fulcrum by those that have bad intent for the world. Russia absolutely used their energy influence over Europe to dissuade NATO action as they poised to invade Ukraine. And then they invaded Ukraine. You know, what did we do? Now we hit them with our purse. It was embarrassing what we've allowed to happen. Back to energy. By our energy, we're funding that war basically by purchase of Russian energy, and we allowed that war to move forward because Russia never had the leverage to do that when we had sanctions in place over their energy delivery into Western Europe. So it is direct results of the policy decisions made at the executive level. So, as a nation, we move forward. Hurricane preparedness is something that as a community, a state, as a people, we seek ever stronger resilience and to learn from lessons past. So that's why we're here today. I thank the lady for for forcing me up here. I did not intend to take questions, but I do say yes, ma'am, when one of my sisters tells me to do something. Thank you, ma'am.
Captain, thank you very
Okay,
much,
yes, sir.
Hold on 1 minute, I need to dial this number again. and
Okay.
I don't want to interrupt you.
Welcome to the meeting. Please enter your conference code followed by the pound or hash sign. If you are the leader, press star now. Please enter your
While the congressman was up here a while ago, I saw Sarah Dake walk in with Senator Cassidy's office. Sarah, thank y'all for being here today. I'm in Kennedy's office. Lauren next to you is Cassidy's office, but yeah, for Senator Kennedy, and thank him for what he's been doing for us up there on appropriations for the port. Also, Lauren Casanova, she is with Senator Bill Cassidy's office. She's here today. Lauren, thank you for showing up. Thank you, appreciate it. Also, just real quick, with the port, I'm the director. We got Joe Kane at the front table. He is our president. I saw Pete Orlando. Pete's one of our commissioners. I don't know if I have any other commissioners here or not, but thank y'all for being here. Morgan City, we have Lee Dragna. I know several of his council people are here. I know we have representatives from Berwick City Council. I think Duval, they said he was out with some surgery and everything, so appreciate the City Council over there showing up. Numerous officials. We got St. Mary Parish officials here today. Thank y'all. Is Mr. Hannegriff?
Probably came eight.
Okay, but I know he's got council people here today, so we thank the parish for being here. DOTD, Molly Boyman with DOTD, she's down here with a couple of her staff and everything, so thank y'all for coming to the meeting and also the support that DOTD gives the Port of Morgan City. So thank y'all once again. We have a representation from the Corps of Engineers here today, from the locks. Just trying to look around. I know I'm probably forgetting a lot of different agencies that we got. The Morgan City PD, we got the Berwick PD. I'm sure this morning, I know we had a lot of representatives from the Sheriff's Department. Patterson was here. We got the Coast Guard here. Thank y'all for being here today. And we're going to go ahead and get started. Our first, well, get that page to turn. I think Tim Osborne, where's Tim? Tim, we're going to let you get started, buddy.
I wanted to thank for NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. We're a large family of many different line offices, but we're all our family, and we're all friends, and we're all co-workers. Twice, I would call myself the front man to Roger Erickson because, you know Roger so much. But I'd like to point out just before I get started that not only do we actually stay and work with you throughout whatever storm you may have to face, we're also in that storm. Twice, I've come in from the outside to Lake Charles, openly wondering whether Roger and his colleagues had survived Hurricane Rita and Hurricane Laura, because they stayed in place and they kept working throughout the storm. Though you did leave the office for Hurricane Laura, but you didn't go far. You went up to join Dick Remion with Lake Charles and Calcasieu GOSEP, which had the large picture windows, which I question your location of hurricane refuge place. But I'd like to just say is the fact that the other thing, and for the congressman to know, as well as the senator's offices, this is probably one of the finest group of peoples we've ever dealt with. The Morgan City crowd and the population really are family. You started this Cindy runs the place. I think we just all vote for that, maximum total agreement. But you started this Hurricane Preparedness Forum many, many years ago. Huh? Yes, I was a young child at the time. And it's really stood the test of time. Not only the test of time, but it's also stood in terms of the fact that you have been the point of stability, responding to storms to the west of us and responding to the storms to the east of us. And you've been the launch pad for recovery. And as I go into the first slide, I just want to point out the fact that Roger will talk about proactivity in terms of planning ahead, preparing the whole bit. Your job is not only in the proactivity portion, but then with the start of the storm season, you're going to be then in the 3 R's. Ready, response, and recovery. And that's the biggest job you'll have in terms of doing that. So how we communicate, how you learn, Roger's going to go into that. For me, what I'd like to say is how much you're contributing right now to all the things. I'm the toolbox. What have we got in the toolbox to talk about storms? And in fact, in a lot of ways, our guys up in the upper left who are pretending to do their brief moment of fame as a Chippendale dance group was actually just in Port Fourchon doing Hurricane Ida recovery. We had 2 teams, boats, and we were working all the way up to Lockport. And this is about as close as you want to get to them after 2 weeks with no running water and no bathing facilities. But at the same time, if you see the others, this is a team that's working in a large boat just offshore. And the congressman mentioned Cameron Parish, Calcasieu Parish, world's largest exporter of LNG in the world today in 6 years. 6 years. 3 of the biggest LNG terminals we have in the Calcasieu Ship Channel, and Sabine Pass with Sempra, the nation's largest LNG terminal. And the question is, how soon can we get open? How soon can we get going? And this is one of our survey boats there, and that's the rig that broke loose twice. I'm sure the congressman's heard about that many times. It went aground in the Calcasieu Ship Channel. They had to be pulled back out. This is what we look like. We are geeks. Now, the bottom left is all the screens on the back of a survey boat working in offshore the Calcasieu Ship Channel, running multi-beam, single beam, side scan, all in the effort to reopen as soon as possible. That same guy, that same boat was offshore at Fourchon for Ida and the Homa Nav and Terrebonne to work the offshore because sea states are tough. So that's the toolbox. It's there last few years. It'll be there for this coming year. And our coordination with all of you as a port, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the United States Coast Guard, has been exemplary. And I can think of no other place that we have in the United States where we have that kind of coordination and that kind of rapport as we do today with our partners. Unless Cindy has sabotaged. Okay, so what do we do now? I think so. I don't know. Side? Here, help me. You don't want me at mine. There we go. All right, next slide. Last 5 years of the hurricane seasons we've had have seen a Cat 4 or a Cat 5 making a landfall on the Gulf Coast each one of those years. This is why it's so important that we talk about, or next slide, we talk about readiness. How many remember 1992? 1992, one hurricane, the only hurricane in August with an A name, and it was Andrew. Double hit. Homestead, Florida as a Cat 5, came over here, damaged almost every structure in St. Mary Parish. So while we may talk about 2020 being one of the most active hurricane seasons in history, the reality is it only takes one hurricane. That's why our preparedness today. The things that I'd like to show you for the toolbox is the heck, what? Okay. I also had systems.
It wasn't turned on.
It wasn't turned on, okay. So for the toolbox, these kind of stations, which congressionally have been supported by the delegation and absolutely been critical. This is Calcasieu Pass. That Calcasieu Pass had Hurricane Laura literally run right over top of it. And that's what a Cat 4 looks like on the upper right hand in the middle of a Cat 4 running right through Calcasieu Pass. We found an 19-foot storm surge value in a bathtub in a camp on the 2nd floor in Cameron Parish. So the post-storm surveying by ground people like Roger's staff and others at USGS really kind of confirmed. But this kind of toolbox and these kind of systems have been absolutely critical. And I want to pitch out right now, the Port of Morgan City and the commissioners have been absolutely amazing and heroic in the support they have financially to create these kind of systems in the Atchafalaya area, where other areas have gaps. Morgan City and the Atchafalaya. This system right there, very similar to what you see with Calcasieu Pass, that was paid for and installed through a construction contract by the Port of Morgan City out there in Eugene Island. This thing is absolutely amazing. It can go through a Cat 4 and continue operating, and it gives the people like the National Weather Service, the Port, Parish administration, everything, real-time observations, how much of a problem we have. Laura was a water and a wind problem. Ida, not so much water, but it was a devastating wind issue. To know those differences in real time as that storm is still making landfall and coming across the coast is a huge issue. And it's a very important one that you locally have supported many, many years. So if you were to take that, click on the link on the internet site at NOAA, and we have follow-ons to this, you'd see right now, 10 minutes ago, this is what you get. Water levels, winds, intensities, a whole bit. Yes, it is Roger's fault that we are not out fishing the last few weeks because of the frontal boundaries that have been keeping us at the dock with all these strong, strong winds. But you can see it in real time. You can also see the same with operational forecasts applied to the same stations where 48 hours in advance, right now, you can see what the weather conditions are forecasted to be in terms of water levels, winds, wear, salinity, temperature, water level. All of those with the investment that has been made in partnership with NOAA. That's your toolbox. The toolbox also is recording the same events during these hurricanes. This is Zeta, Hurricane Ida. And with all of this, I want to remind you that another fellow federal agency, FEMA, who you love so much, literally requires you to prove that you actually got hit by a hurricane. And this is the data that you have, official federal data that you have to help support you in your recovery of claims, proving what kind of wind fields you had, what kind of floods did you have, what kind of surge you had. So all of this is very important. All of this is archived. And so with every storm, literally a week after that storm, we produce a high water event report that you immediately can use for your type of documentation for any kind of mission assignments, any kind of tasks you can get, anything you need to prove that you've got this in bed. This is all things that we then start compiling throughout and we create this toolbox. This toolbox is really important. Roger uses it, everyone else like you have it as your resource because as you know, recovery is not instantaneous. Roger's still trying to deal with finishing touches on repairs to his house from Hurricane Laura. How many people know this experience? How many people are still dealing years later with recovery? And we're here there to provide you the information you need to do. Now, one of the other things that we have, and I'd like to really keep pointing out to you because the Corps of Engineers has been really good about this, immediately after this storm, we get up with aircraft over top of the impact area. We start flying remote imagery that then is posted to our NOAA site. Every one of these listings is an actual hurricane or a tornado event or something that then we go ahead and start posting for you. 1 foot resolution, we take it actually a slightly oblique angle, and you can download it and you start then actually doing assessments of your own parish, of your own industry, of your own waterway, of where you've got damage, how severe is the damage, and then helping support people like David and others in terms of justifying for FEMA that we have a certain threshold of damage, therefore we're eligible for a certain level of reimbursement. That's the kind of thing that's really important. The thing that I'd like to point out is that we need a lot more. So we've recently in meetings with the Corps of Engineers and with David and others like the Port want to expand that. If you see areas that aren't being covered, tell us, we'll get it off to FEMA and have them essentially then come back to us with an authorization to expand out that level of imagery acquisition. This is really important because in a lot of ways you may be out of the area. You may not be able to get in, but you need first looks of what is there. Do I have a road? Fushan openly wondered, do I still have a port? And this kind of imagery helps confirm that, and then start building a better base of information how much damage is out there. The kind of things that you see, Venture Global, Calcasieu Pass, got hit by Laura and Ida under construction. This is a $25 billion terminal that just opened up and just started receiving the first ship in February. Now it's about 15 ships in. Every one of those ships is about a $300 million ship. The cargo today, with the gas prices that are today, every one of those ships is loading about $300 million worth of liquefied natural gas on and then going offshore. Simpra on the Sabine Pass, Cameron Parish, is loading 40 ships a month. And this is where Venture Global wants to be, and this is where Cameron LNG up in Hackberry wants to be as well. And they just announced they're adding another train. And much to the great credit of the Calcasieu and the Lake Charles area, Brown got on Driftwood, which is starting construction as we speak. 4 LNG terminals in the southwest Louisiana area, and in less than 6 years has eclipsed Qatar and Australia as being the largest exporters of LNG from this country in 72 months. In 72 months. Think about the industry and the commerce of the United States, the sheer power we have to be able to create that kind of scale in terms of our world markets. So preparing like we are with these meetings and then recovering is really the key, and this all starts with the kind of efforts like Morgan City has had. This is more imagery on the right-hand side that we had. And I'd like to just point out that a lot of the issues really comes back to the grunt work. And I'm talking about grunt work, where we get people in, on the ground, put out the ugliest boats you can ever find in terms of survey response, bring travel trailers in, use offshore boats, and reopen Calcasieu Pass, Calcasieu Ship Channel, Port Fushan, Port of Houma Terrebonne within a week of each one of those storm events. And it's not us. It takes the Corps of Engineers, it takes the United States Coast Guard, it takes the pilots, it takes the port administration, the executive management. I mean, simple things like Port Fushan just bringing us a tank load of water. But you got 8 guys working there with no access to anything else, and we had the Corps of Engineers bring us fuel for the boats and the trailers. Port Fushan brought us water for the crew. So we were able to stay there and work 14 hours and without delay, without let up, and we brought in the large ship over there as well. So looking at this partnership, Mac, Cindy, Tori hosted one of our teams right here on the dock, right out there. Safe and able to work, but actually they got detailed back over to Fushan because of the severity of the problem, and a bad outboard, which Hanko Hofpower was able to deal with. So thank you, Hanko Outboards. But all of this comes with the fact that everything we do with this toolbox is basically due to the kind of planning and proactivity we have today. We know which ports to work with, we know who the contacts are, and when we're reporting, we will report anything at any time in any means possible with their survey team's own personal cell phones, taking a picture of the home HNC, said, look at these 2 boats. Right here, awash down on the HNC. Here's the location of where they are, come get them. So people like David Ravelay, good friends with Mac and Cindy and Tori, or Chet Chasson, in real time, we're using a sat phone to send texts to each other with pictures about dry docks hard up in the marsh or the wetlands. So people, even if they can't be there, but we're going to tell you. Now we can trade very high-end GIS files to Corps of Engineers. We can be more descriptive with Coast Guard, but sometimes if it comes to basic communications like that, that works just fine. Lastly, I'd like to just say that all these reports are really always archived here. We use them all the time as lessons learned. When did the storm start? How high was the storm surge? What were the wind fields? All of these are there for your documentation. And lastly, I'd say that there's no better and finer crew than the Port of Morgan City for what they're doing to the coast. Millions of cubic yards of dredge material out of the Atchafalaya and the Atchafalaya Ship Channel being used to basically recreate and restore and create wetlands here, the Atchafalaya. We lose the coast, we're losing our industry and economy. And so these are examples of not only every day running a port, but also creating and saving the coast that's so important to this whole area. And I think that is it. I hope so. Except thank you so much. You guys have been terrific. You guys are family. And I'd like to just commend that we hopefully have a really boring year, but we also will see each one of you next year for the next hurricane season plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cameron. Next, we have Arthur Erickson with the National Weather Service.
All right, thank you. So the presentation I have here, we're going to start off with what's the first thing that I look at every day during hurricane season. And I would recommend something that all of us should look at every day during hurricane season. All right, it's still turned on. On to the next slide. Oh, good. All right. What we're looking at here is something called the Tropical Weather Outlook. It's done by the National Hurricane Center 4 times a day at 1 a.m., 7 a.m., 1 p.m., and 7 p.m. And basically what it is an outline across the Atlantic, Caribbean, and Gulf of Mexico of where we expect possible tropical development. If it's shaded in yellow, it's less than a 40% chance of something to develop in the next 5 days. If it's orange, it's between 40 and 60%, and if it's red, it's over 60%. So this gives us a tip-off before something actually develops and heads towards our area. Now, there is a plan from the Hurricane Center to expand this beyond 5 days to include a 7-day forecast. So when you're watching things on Facebook and people are sharing weather models for 336 hours from now that say, hey, look at that, Memorial Day, we're going to get nailed in Louisiana, right? That's just garbage. You know, if the meteorologists or the weather service aren't sharing a 336-hour weather model, there's probably a reason for it. And the reason for it is just that. It's not accurate. It's not showing any accuracy at all. And we could argue that even last year, 6 days before Ida, I can show you why. This is 6 days before Ida makes landfall here in Louisiana. And what are we advertising? A low chance of something developing in the Caribbean. It's not a threat to Louisiana, right? 6 days before a Category 4 hurricane hits Louisiana, we're saying, well, there might be something in the Caribbean in the next 5 days. 5 days out, we've bumped it up now to the orange shade, so it's between 40 and 60%. And it's kind of nudging into the Bay of Campeche, so we're saying, yeah, Mexico looks like they might get something going. We're not saying Category 4, we're just saying there might be a tropical system down there in the Bay of Campeche, but 5 days before landfall, we're not advertising Louisiana. 4 days before landfall. Okay, now we're starting to get excited in a not excited way, right? We're saying over a 60% chance of something developing down there in the Caribbean, and we do think it's going to come in the Gulf. And if you're looking at that red blob, I mean, where do you think it's going to go to? Texas. That's what I would think too, just looking at that. So I mean, we're watching it, but we're not thinking it's going to be a problem for us necessarily. 3 days out, that red blob does a pretty significant shift. And now it's showing it heading towards Louisiana. 3 days before a Category 4 is coming here. So when you think about those weather models that people are sharing all over Facebook saying, look at this, at 368 hours out, it's going to be going... We can't even tell you where it's going to be 3 days out, let alone 368 hours out. So just be aware of that. That's just the state of the science that we got today. Now, 3 days before landfall, that's how we started the day, 8 o'clock in the morning. By 10 o'clock in the morning, we started our first advisory, and we're showing where we think this potential hurricane is going to be going. It's a tropical depression. The wind speeds are 35 miles an hour, and we expect it to run over the edge of Cuba and then come into Gulf, and then eventually hit Louisiana somewhere between Sunday and Monday. You can see there The 8 o'clock Monday point is inland in Louisiana. And where does the error cone indicate this thing could potentially go? Anywhere from the Houston-Galveston area all the way over towards almost Mobile. So it's a large area of the Gulf 3 days out that we're advertising might get hit by a hurricane. And by the way, we're not saying a Category 3 hurricane. We're just saying Category 1 or a Category 2 hurricane. Now, this forecast here doesn't come out the same time as a tropical weather outlook. Once we actually have an individual forecast for a system, that is updated 4 times a day at 4 and 10, AM and PM, which coincidentally lines up with when I do the weather briefings with the local officials. So, we'll provide the latest update at 10 o'clock in the morning. We'll do another update at 4 in the afternoon. And if it's a system that's changing and is coming towards us, we'll add the 4 in the morning, or we'll add the 1 at 10 in the evening as well. Here we are, this is on Friday, 2 days before landfall. Ida is a tropical storm. It's just below hurricane force, it's 65-mile-an-hour winds. And now we're saying that it's going to become a major hurricane. Major hurricane is Category 3 or stronger. So we're on Friday talking about a storm making landfall in 2 days. That's going to be Category 3 when it's heading towards Louisiana. And because we're 1 day closer to the event, you can see the error cone now is taking Texas out of the equation, and it's basically zeroing in on Louisiana. But you see that we're not really advertising Lake Charles has got a better shot or a worse shot than New Orleans. It's literally the entire state that's under the gun for a system that's coming in literally in 48 hours. So when you're the local officials making those decisions on what are you going to do 2 days out, hopefully you've already made your decisions in terms of evacuation calls and shelter in places and whatnot. Here we are the day before landfall, Saturday. This storm is still, it's a hurricane now, Category 1, 85-mile-an-hour winds, advertising it to become a major hurricane at any time. But what's interesting here is, note this, we're at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. We're advertising it as a 85-mile-an-hour wind hurricane. The next day at 10 o'clock in the morning, it's 150-mile-an-hour winds. This thing went from 85 miles an hour to 150-mile-an-hour winds in less than 24 hours. So it went from, oh yeah, it's going to be a bad wind at 85 miles an hour to, now we're like worried about people dying from everything from the surge to the winds to tornadoes and rainfall, all of that stuff. So that was kind of the timeline that we got associated last year with Ida as it was coming towards Louisiana. We do other products to help explain things to the community. Also, we have this thing called the tropical storm wind probabilities. And so we'll have this 5 days out, hopefully before the storm's coming in. And it'll show you the different shades of the chances of tropical storm force winds in your area. Here we are, this is on Thursday. So here we are 3 days before landfall. And you see that the probability for tropical storm force winds is the same for Lake Charles as it is for New Orleans. And I can tell you, Lake Charles did not get hurricane or tropical storm force winds from the system. But did New Orleans? Oh yeah. But the accuracy of the weather models, you can't differentiate Lake Charles to New Orleans 3 days out who's going to get the tropical storm force winds. This is kind of the transition from the Thursday to the Friday. You can see now we got the higher winds in New Orleans versus Lake Charles. As we get closer to the event the day before, still has pretty high probabilities for Lake Charles area versus New Orleans. And then finally the day of, you can see that the probability is really narrowed down. That's just, again, the state of the science because of the accuracies of the weather forecast that we can only give you so much specific detail. What's it going to be at my house? I can tell you plus or minus 20 miles an hour, 24 hours in advance. I mean, that's as good as it's going to get. And the threat for that Ida coming here was obviously just as high as it was going to Grand Isle or Lafourche, any of the areas to our east that got totally hammered by a Category 4 hurricane. Here's the hurricane force winds, and we'll just run through this very quickly, but basically it's the same timeline that shows the higher wind probabilities to our east. But when you watch where it starts in the very beginning, the chances of it being high over here in Lake Charles are just as high as it is over in New Orleans. So this is why it's important to follow this graphic from one day to the next. And this is why this is part of the briefings that I do to the local officials to say, okay, here is what it was yesterday, this is what we're looking at today. All right, and then the next group of slides that we have on here is the timing of the winds coming into your area. When is tropical storm force winds going to arrive? There's two scenarios, the most likely arrival time and the earliest reasonable arrival time. And basically, both of them are showing Sunday morning being the timeline for that into St. Mary Parish. We also show the storm surge forecast, and the storm surge forecast is going to be great in terms of where it makes landfall, and it's going to be pretty overblown for areas to the west of landfall, because if you think about a hurricane spinning counterclockwise, the right side of where the storm goes is going to be where the really bad stuff is. If you're on the west side, it's not going to be nearly as bad. You know, here in St. Mary Parish, we had the strong north winds behind the storm as it was making landfall. We probably had, you know, oceanfront property for hundreds of yards out here in the Atchafalaya Bay and whatnot because the winds are blowing offshore. But we had the potential, you can see based on this graphic here, the red on this graphic is water level depth greater than 9 feet. So we have the potential for water to be as deep as 9 feet above ground level here in the region. And by the way, you do also see something else here in St. Mary Parish, which is very unique for south central Louisiana. We've got this hatched white area. That's the levee system they have here in St. Mary Parish. You know, kudos to the region here for having something to protect the community from the hurricane storm surge coming into the area here. So we don't have a number, obviously, inside of a levee system. When we're talking about the tornado threats, we also put out forecasts specifically for the tornado multiple times during the day, whether it's a one-day forecast, a two-day forecast, or day 3 through day 8. And so we outline, generically speaking, areas of the country where we think they're going to be a threat for tornadoes. As the tornadoes or the hurricane's heading towards the coast, we'll issue a tornado watch for large sections of the state, and we'll update that as needed. And something that a lot of people are probably unaware of is that we have a not top secret conference call every day at noon with the National Hurricane Center to talk about what do we see coming down the road on day 6 and day 7. Because remember in the very beginning of the slideshow I said we have this tropical weather outlook that's updated 4 times a day, and it's talking about things in the next 5 days. But once a day we have a conference call with the Hurricane Center to talk about what's going to come up in the next 7 days. And so this will be a graphic that looks like this, a hemispheric map that shows all across the Eastern Pacific, all across the Gulf, the Caribbean, and the Atlantic on where we think there might be something developing as well. So we'll draw a low pressure area on there if we think something is going to be developing in day 6 and the day 7. A lot of times this will be the very first graphic that we're sharing on our social media posts or on our briefings to the local officials. And finally, the last part I wanted to talk about today was our rainfall forecasts, which, as you can all imagine, you think, boy, you guys really don't do a good job with the rainfall forecast, right? You say 40%, that means I don't need to have anything here, right? So I understand the grief that we get it. We do get updates for these forecasts basically twice a day, once near midnight and once in the afternoon, with updates at 3:30 in the morning and the afternoon. But you know, these graphics aren't telling you everything in context. I mean, if we're showing 2 inches of rain for a local area, I mean, whoop-de-doo, right? Unless I tell you that that 2 inches is going to fall in 10 minutes, then it's like, whoa, that's going to cause a problem. You know, forget about any city's water drainage area. I mean, you're not going to be able to keep up with 2 inches of rain falling in a short period of time like that. You're going to have minor street flooding if it occurs. So we started a new product 11 years ago called the Excessive Rainfall Outlook, which basically is showing you hatched areas across the United States where we think there has a potential for flash flooding. So the color codes for this is similar to all these other color codes that we got. Basically the lower threshold being in green for just isolated spots for flash flooding, all the way up to the pink on the right side where we expect widespread flash flooding for a local area. That pink on the right side is called the high risk areas or the high excessive rainfall outlook graphics. So in the last 11 years, we've had 171 high risk days across the United States. These are our forecasts, I should say. We forecasted 171 high risk days. And during those 171 days nationally, we've had over $70 billion worth of damages, 410 flood fatalities, and individually 28 systems that cause at least $1 billion worth of damages. So we've had a lot of events in 11 years. You know, bottom line, floods is the #1 weather disaster every year, year in and year out in the United States. I mean, the hurricanes are the big sexy version of the floods, but the reality is flood is the #1 disaster that we get year in and year out. Statistically, whether you're talking about deaths, whether you're talking about property damage, it's always floods. So these high-risk days are basically showing you the days that we're expecting deaths and damages. 46% of our days that we forecasted high risk, we had at least one fatality. 62% of them, we had at least $1 million worth of damages that day. I mean, you imagine being the mayor of Morgan City and you're hearing that we have a 62% chance of $1 million worth of damages today based on this forecast. I mean, it's kind of heavy stuff. And you may have one of your citizens die today. I mean, it's not fun stuff to be forecasting, obviously, when it happens. This is a crazy stat here from Hurricane Harvey back in 2017. Now, Harvey, was a Category 4, making it landfall in South Texas, but then it meandered the remnants of it up into north, up towards southeast Texas and southwest Louisiana, flooded Houston, flooded the Beaumont areas of southeast Texas. The damage that they had accounts for 51% of all the damages between 2010 and 2020. So 10 years worth of flood damages nationally occurred in one event in 2017. Mostly because it hit major metropolitan areas. And in terms of dollar figures, 51% of the damages and 62% of the damages of all the high-risk days. So it's a big deal. The good news is we're starting to get better forecasts in terms of how large of an area we're advertising is in the high-risk area. Because last thing you want to do is say everyone from Houston to Pensacola is going to be hit by heavy rain that's going to cause flooding, right? You want to make it as narrow, small of an area as possible. So you can see the trend line in the last 11 years. We've gone from over 60,000 square mile areas down to about under 40,000. So we're getting better with it. But the reality is, where are the bullseyes for these events? They are here local. This is all the local weather offices in the United States. There's 122 National Weather Service offices. And who's #1 for the most high-risk days? My office in Lake Charles. We've had 26 of these things in the last 5 years. When you break it down by states, Texas has 25, Louisiana's got 20. And when you break it down by metropolitan areas, Beaumont, Port Arthur in Texas, Lake Charles, Houston's at 3, New Orleans 4, Lafayette 5. I mean, Baton Rouge is tied for 7th. So we got a lot of Louisiana cities listed here for the high-risk days in the last 5 years. It's not, and this isn't just a coincidence of, well, it's been really bad the last 5 years, Roger. If we were making excessive rainfall forecasts back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, we would have the same number associated with it. I mean, this is just the part of the country that has the most floods in the United States. It is where we live. It's what we love. Well, maybe not the flood part of it, but we love the communities that we live in down here. In any given season, we're monitoring literally 100 tropical waves coming off the coast of Africa towards the North America, South America. Out of those 100 systems, maybe 12 of them become a tropical system. Out of those 12, maybe 6 become a hurricane. And out of those 6 hurricanes, typically 3 will become a Category 3 or stronger. But there's one correlation that I look at every year that tells me how busy is it going to be specifically in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, I don't have anything that can be specifically for Morgan City or specifically for St. Mary Parish or even specifically for Louisiana. There's just not enough accuracy with the long-range forecasting for that. But there is some accuracy in terms of telling you what part of the hemisphere is going to be nailed by tropical systems from one year to the next. And so what I look at is something called the El Nino, La Nina phenomena. So what El Nino and La Nina is defined as, we're looking at the temperatures near the equator in the eastern Pacific Ocean. So that's what that red oval that we're looking at. We're looking at the water temperature anomalies. So the blue area is below normal water temperatures, and the yellow-orange areas are above normal. So if it's above normal inside that area, it's El Nino. If it's La Nina, it's all blue. And you can see January earlier this year, mostly all blue. We're maybe on the right side there, April 3rd. We're starting to get some yellows creeping into it. So we may be transitioning from La Nina back to what we call the neutral state. We'll see how quickly that kicks in, whether it kicks in the next month or 3 months. But what it does tell us, though, is a lot of information in terms of how much activity do we typically see in the Gulf of Mexico. So I did this study back in 2018 that looked at just of all the tropical systems in the Gulf of Mexico, how many do we average in general? So all the way on the left side of the graphic here, all years, we average 4.6 tropical storms every year in the Gulf. If you averaged up all these years and divide by the number of years, we average almost 5 tropical storms every year in the Gulf. And now those 5 storms, almost 2 of them become a hurricane, which is indicated by the yellow. And now those 2 hurricanes, one of them becomes a Category 3 or stronger. So that's an average year, 5, 2, and 1. And you can see based on, are we in an El Nino pattern, La Nina, transitions from one to the other. Some patterns are more favorable for more activity than others. So this year, right now we're in La Nina, which would indicate that slide all the way to the right. 5.7 tropical storms, 2.4 hurricanes, and 1 major hurricane. But like I said earlier, we may be transitioning from La Nina back to neutral, which is just the very next one to the left of that, right? All the way over here. So right now we're in this state, and we may transition to this one. This one's 5.4, 3.2, and 1. I mean, neither one is what I would call make me feel happy and giddy inside about the upcoming hurricane season, right? I mean, what we're advertising here is another busy season. I hope it's not here. I hope it's not Louisiana. I hope it's not Texas either, actually. But you know, the reality is the Gulf's going to be busy again this year, and whether or not it comes here or not will depend on the steering currents at the time. But it's something that bears watching as we go through the rest of the season. And that's the end of my slideshow.
Can we take a question? So going back to that map, that graph you just showed us, is there any science that can help you to predict where those storms are going to go?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, the problem right now is this is generic over a 6-month time frame, right? We're forecasting from basically May into the end of the season and end of November. But to tell you specifically, is it like a West Gulf threat, like a Texas, Louisiana versus a Florida threat? No, we haven't found a correlation yet from this perspective. Something's that I'm still digging around, seeing if I can find another correlation, but I haven't found one yet.
But you're still working.
Yep, still working on it.
Is there any technology that you're needing that would help us into the future to predict that you can't get your hands on now? Is there technology out there that can assist you all?
I wouldn't, you know, generically speaking, I wouldn't say so, no. I mean, you know, we've got a great budget. You know, the information that we get, the data that we have coming into the office is all doing very well. Something that you always concern yourself with is, you know, just continuity of operations type things. You know, my office specifically at the Lake Charles Regional Airport, we've been hit by 2 Category 3 or 4 hurricanes now in this century, right? 2005 and 2020. And neither one was, and I stayed in Lake Charles for both of those events. One in 05 with Rita, I stayed in the office. 2020, I was downtown Lake Charles in a skyscraper, which is even a worse probably scenario than what I should have done in my office. You know, you worry about your continuity of operations because, you know, you don't expect everyone to come in and risk their life like that. So, you know, for us personally, I mean, getting us to a more secure spot where we don't have to be worried about the storm surge coming in and flood the office that we have to evacuate. I mean, that's something that I would be looking at, but it's not what I would consider like the most critical thing in the world, you know.
We have seen in the last several years a real lack of failure of our comm systems. The severity of the storms the last few years have actually cratered a lot of our cell phone tower capability. So we had a lot of communication issues dealing with getting access to local government, local emergency responders. You know this because you had fire emergencies. Things are down, radio's gone, phones aren't working. And so for us, but also as a shared thing with you as a community, any way that in any future meetings you have with the state or with national communication networks like, you know, the T-Mobiles, the Verizons, the AT&Ts, about coming and responding quickly with mobile cell phone towers, mobile networks. That's a really critical issue for us. It's a really critical issue for you, and something that I think is really important to make sure that we're able see and communicate immediately after those storms as to how the severity of the population that's been impacted. The other thing that just as much as you see Morgan City and the Atchafalaya Bay and Calcasieu, Lake Charles area with those really, really dense, robust, real-time observations, those tide and water level stations, Fourchon didn't have it. Terrebonne Parish didn't have that. They had one small station over on the eastern side of Grand Isle. National Hurricane Center really could not see the water levels, the surge, nor the wind fields in real time coming right over Port Fourchon. So we need more of those real-time hurricane-hardened stations in those areas to be able to document these kind of events as well. So that's the toolbox, densifying and enriching the toolbox and creating a better and more faster reconstitution of our cell phone and other kind of communications in these hard impacted areas.
That's another thing, Raj. If we're all dependent on your information that we get. And if you go down, we have nothing.
Right. Right. So that's the thing that we're wanting to look at from our perspective is what can we do to harden our structure. Somewhere with this building here, I mean, this is a great building to be in if we have a big hurricane, right? We're elevated, we're high off the ground. This is the kind of thing that we need to have in Lake Charles for our office.
Sir, could you go back to the La Nina temperature maps, the global pictures there? Okay, so the temperatures there from your graph are cooler in the Pacific. We really can't see coming off of Africa, but because it's cut off there. But would you explain the correlation of temperatures in the Pacific and how that impacts storm systems coming off of the continent of Africa that we watch, the depressions and the tropical systems that we see develop into storms that we start watching very carefully during the storm season?
Yeah. So what happens is, based on this water temperature in the eastern Pacific, when it's cooler than normal, it pushes the jet stream further north across North America and the Atlantic. The jet stream is like, those winds at 30,000 feet. And when that wind's blowing at 100 mile an hour or stronger out there, that's terrible for hurricanes. So that's why in El Nino seasons, we typically have fewer storms out there because the jet stream's moving across the main development region from Africa over to North America. During La Nina, that jet stream gets pushed further north, and it's not aiding us by making more unfavorable weather environment for them.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies that for me. So the temperature impacts the jet stream,
right?
And the jet stream like decapitates the systems that
exactly.
are coming across the Atlantic.
Right.
But the jet stream is further north. It allows those systems to develop.
Right, to become stronger, not just a hurricane, but a Category 3, a Category 4, or 5 hurricane. Right.
And you're saying us move back into a neutral between La Nina and El Nino?
That's what we're forecasting for later this summer, yes. Okay. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Right, thank you very much. The next speaker will be David Nycam, Homeland Security from St. Mary Parish.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you having us. Thank you all for coming. Certainly, a lot of information with these two guys, and I promise you, we live and die by what they say. We have a good relationship with them. We can call them on the phone anytime, day and night, and certainly, we hope we're going to have a boring year this year. Okay, that's the idea. This is just a track map from last year. I like to throw it up there to kind of show you how crazy it really was last year. And obviously, what we determined is pretty interesting was the fact that Ida killed as many people up in the Northeast as it did down here. I mean, that thing, when it took off, it went through Alabama and Georgia. I mean, it went all the way up the East Coast and it was crazy. The hurricanes, I'm going to go back to Hilda and Betsy. I'm not telling you how old I am, but I graduated high school in 1905, and it just seems like, the hurricanes would hit the Gulf Coast, there'd be 5 parishes maybe involved, That hasn't been the case for the last, I can't remember when. Monroe, look, Laura wound up in Monroe and did as much damage up there as it did anywhere. And oh, by the way, that's where most of our evacuees were up in Monroe. So they went from the frying pan to the fire. So it's just kind of interesting to see how it's all played out in the last few years. But I like to put that graph up just to kind of remember how we used to watch them as they come. And this is going to be another year where I think we're going to be at least watching them. We're going to have this center open in the event of a system or a hurricane or whatever. Of course, we're also going to have the one in Franklin. We like to split up. It gives us an opportunity to really cover both ends of the parish, pretty well. I will say that we are going to have our meetings like we always do. Roger does the 10 and 4, and it's like 10:03 and 4:03 because he's got to get the latest updated graphs. And then what we try to do, and I hope everybody that got here today signed up with Janet on the sign-up pages, because what we'll do is as soon as his updates are over, we email everybody his slides, so you get it just like we would get it if you were sitting in the room. So don't mind if you come, but you know what happens sometimes, we get over here and the rooms get so full that it's kind of hard to really get anything accomplished. So. But certainly you're welcome to come, and if not, we did Zoom meetings the last couple of years. We may do those again. Those seem to have worked out pretty well. That's one thing COVID taught us, that we don't all have to be in the same room all the time. So we're going to probably have a little bit of everything, and we'll let you know as best we can as time allows us. All right. Hurricane Center gives us the information, and that's what we use to update all of our officials, let them know what's going on. And then, what measures we're going to take or what evacuation orders we're going to need or whatever is going to occur after that. Now, for all the mayors that are here, parish councilmen, city councilmen, GOSEP now offers training for all elected officials. And it's important that maybe some elected officials, parish council, city councils, whatever, really don't understand maybe what their roles and responsibilities are, because everybody has a place. And it's a pretty interesting little meeting. We got a guy, Mr. Lee John, he was our regional director. He'll come down and actually perform those services for you. So if you have interest in it, if you let me know, we'll kind of get a little group together and we'll have him come down and go through everything. And it's pretty interesting, and I think it's very informative for what we need. We live and die on the storm surge projections. It's what they give us. I hated the AGL, above ground level. I hate that word. It just kills me. I can't get it in my mind, because if you don't know what ground level is, how do you know how high up it's going to go? But that's just me. I'm not a smart fellow. But we have struggled with that a lot. But I tell you what, in the past, what I learned during all my, I think, 49 hurricanes and tropical storms I've done, from sheriff to chief of police and whatever, you run from the water and you hide from the wind. Well, so if that's going to be the most important thing we got, this is what we try to live and die by. I believe their accuracy is a lot better than what people give them credit for. I mean, they nailed Hurricane Laura's. In fact, they were a little short, I think. I think they predicted 15, and it wound up being 18 or 19. Can you imagine 18 or 9 foot high wall of water running over you? I mean, that's just, it's mind-boggling to me how bad that actually could really be. But certainly, until this year, this is the first time I saw one of Roger's slides that he actually had Morgan City's levee system halfway, planned out, because in years past we didn't get that. They said 6 foot of water in Franklin. Like, we got a 10-foot levee around the city of Franklin. So, I mean, we knew that wasn't going to be the case, but it was very scary to tell people, oh, don't worry about 6 foot, we good with 6 foot. But, it's getting better. It's getting better all the time, and Mike and Tim and them have I think they've done an excellent job with our levee protection systems all the way around. And then, of course, what happens is, after the fact, he might predict 7-foot surge, and we get a 8-foot surge. Well, we have watermarks set throughout the coast. Sycamore Point, Burns Point, where else, Jimmy? We got another one? Somewhere. Anyway, we got watermarks. So when he says we had a 7-foot surge, literally, we can go put our finger on a piece of property that shows where the 7-foot watermark is. So, and we've done that for several years because we were still trying to figure out how we're going to compare an 8-foot surge to what the actual water was at Sycamore Point, for example. But I think we did, we're getting better with it. The problem is we're getting better with it because of experience, and that's not the best way to determine that one in my book. But we do have that, and we try to use it as much as we can. Now, you run from the water high from the wind. That's what you can't do right there. I cannot imagine Hurricane Harvey coming to Morgan City, Louisiana, and dropping 40 inches of rain in 5 days. I can't fathom it. I'm trying to figure out what little guy they got running out there emptying the water gauge every 2 hours to refill it. I mean, some of these numbers, I mean, these are legitimate numbers on that right side over there where they actually measured that much rainfall. And y'all got good pumps, but there ain't no pump that I'm aware of that's going to do that. And the other side of the levee system was built to keep the riverine water, spring flooding out, and it's to keep tidal surges out. But you got to pump it out once it lands inside in a rain situation. That is what I feel is the biggest problem we're going to face if that event right there ever happened anywhere in St. Mary Parish. So, and that's one that they're good, but they can't predict that always either. They're going to predict, the problem with Harvey, it kind of stalled, if I remember right, and it kind of jumped around left and right and up and down and just wouldn't lead. So, but anyway, GetAGamePlan.org. If you hadn't heard that, you hadn't been around. GetAGamePlan.org will give you everything you need to know about if you're going to stay, if you're going to go, if you're going to evacuate. If you're not going to evacuate, it'll tell you exactly what to do and what you should get. The last couple of years, we had our fire departments really helped us out with oxygen bottles. And this year, if I understand it correctly, they're actually going to try to offer generator power for people who have O2 concentrators. I think I said it right. To go refill their oxygen bottle in the event there's long-term power outages. And I'm telling you, I have never realized how big of a deal that was until this past year. It is a huge, huge deal. I think the fire departments last year, Morgan City and Franklin probably gave out 75, maybe, I think is the number they gave us this morning. 75 O2 bottles to people that, because we were out of power and they needed oxygen. And that was a pretty interesting stat that kind of even avoided me a little bit. So, but that's always a good place to go, and that's an internet site, so it shouldn't be a problem. On the pre-storm, we're asking that, y'all check your generators, get your extra fuel filter, all filters, have your maintenance guy go check everything. You ought to be doing that right now. Don't wait till the last minute. Get you a fuel plan. Hurricane Ida made us realize what? We wasn't ready for that one, huh? I know we wasn't. And that was just the police and the firemen that couldn't get gas as well as everybody else. So, but that certainly is something we need to look at real close. And then, of course, the thing we like to try to get across is if y'all could document or invoice, take pictures of everything you're doing, because there will be a point in time when FEMA may say, man, you said you did this, can you prove it to us? And that's always a good thing, is to over document, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that's holding that checkbook that we can, that we're all going to have to go to try to get reimbursement for some of this. And of course, it's the call out numbers, which is the other reason I like these events, is we get new numbers and email addresses for everybody. Not that it's going to work when we have what we had last year, but certainly, Congressman, I'll tell you what saved us last year was the Starlink system. We used it in our shelters, and we used it here for a little while, that we're able to get internet, email, telephones, text messages, and all of that fairly quickly. It's a relatively inexpensive device, but the service charge will eat you up. And you got to have it today, whether you use it next week or not. So That's, but we got it, and I will say this, that in our meetings we've had, Jimmy and I and most everybody that's had after hurricane meetings, we complained about communications. It was terrible. I can't say there's a legitimate excuse for it because the system failed, the backup failed, the backup to the backup failed. And, you know, not to blame anybody, but certainly AT&T ran in here and gave us all FirstNet. And it did just what they said it would do. They were the first ones to go out. So, but all of them were, we all had trouble, obviously, but certainly the state has said they're going to have a solution for us before hurricane season, and that's right around the corner, isn't it? It's pretty close. Everybody by now should know their evacuation routes. Again, that'll be on the Get a Game Plan, all that at the GOSEP website. Try to stay on top of everything, and we like to refer everybody to the 511la.org. That's always a good site last minute to make sure your way is clear wherever you're going. Really don't have any shelters here pre-storm. We may open up some post-storm, but certainly I will say it's a last resort for people. It's not comfortable. If you don't have anything else, then okay, it's good. But you know, it's a cot, and it's another cot, and it's another cot, and there's nothing in between. And there's, you know, it's just very, I mean, I don't think it's a very friendly type of place, but if you don't have nothing else, I guess it's all right. But certainly we would hope that you have an alternative, but if you don't, that's fine. We're going to take care of it as best we can. But I don't particularly care for the way we treat our shelter people. I don't think it's, I think we got to do something other than what we're doing, but that's another story for another time. We are going to use local school buses to take people out. Problem we had last year is we called on our school buses and they had already left. So they took off a little bit ahead of time. But certainly we're going to work on that. We actually do not have a signed contract with our point-to-point shelter, but we're working on it. Everybody in the group is new directors, new owners, new whatever, and we're trying to work that out here pretty soon. We should have that relatively soon. And we're going to maintain our 2 pickup points for people who actually need a ride to a shelter, which would be Morgan City Junior and Franklin Senior High. After the storm, what we have lacked in the last few years, especially for the municipalities, is to get your debris assessment, your debris plan, any assessment of any property. That goes for us too back there. Book all you guys need to report to us the damage that y'all might have somewhere, because what it requires is, the second to last bullet, is all damages in the parish are compiled to reach the threshold for FEMA to pay the bills. And the threshold today changed from last year. It's $4.10 times your population. And our population is 49,782 or something like that. So, but everybody who has damage will go toward that one threshold. So certainly if you can report it to us, just so we can meet the threshold to determine whether FEMA will reimburse us and to what level they'll reimburse us as well.
That's residential and commercial?
Everything. That's everything. Yes. Everything. And we've gotten there the last few years, but it's been, sometimes it gets pretty close. But they really jumped up the number this past year, but our offset was we lost 11% of our population. So, but it's still right at 230,000 parish-wide damage, which that's pretty easy to get to. But we don't want to leave anybody out either. Oh, Winston Churchill, pretty smart fella, he says that those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it. Now, Roger, you can close your ears again, because you know I'm going to say it again. But what we've done, Roger's one of those guys that if you call him with a goofy little question like, hey man, look, what's happened over the last 5 years, and then he'll go do all the research and get it to you. But we ask more than one person most of the time. So this year, 2022, versus our previous years, this is what's been similar according to some forecasters, okay? And they deal with the water temperatures, which he went through that, and why it's important. And okay, of course, this year they're also looking at, which he agrees with, Roger agrees with, that those African monsoons are going to probably be rolling this year again, like they do. You know, we watch them all the time come flying off the coast. And those are what we can track for many, many, many days. Also, this is the third year consecutive of La Nina. I said it right? Okay. La Nina is the third year in a row. And in those 3 years in a row, I felt like I'd like to know what happened those other 3 years in a row as far as hurricane tracks. So they sent it to me. Now, it doesn't mean anything. I'm just saying, this is history, okay? We're just going by what's happened in the past. So 1 year, pretty active season. This was 1996. A lot of activity. Nothing in Louisiana, huh? Not saying that's going to happen this year, just saying. Next year, 99. Lots of activity. Nothing in Louisiana. I think y'all know where I'm going with this. Roger's going to kill me, I know. But we did have 1 year. That was Danny, I believe. This was Danny that came through and clipped us a little bit. But most of the activity stayed out in the Atlantic. 2015. That wasn't a La Nina year, but that was the same. The sea temperatures were the same now as they were in 2015. 2018. Which one we caught? Was 18 Michael?
Yes.
18 was Michael. That's what did the Mexico Beach in Florida Panhandle. And then we had one in September. Who was that? Gordon. That was Gordon. Kind of almost caught us, but not quite. But look at all the activity. We didn't even have one that hit us direct. So I'm not saying it's going to happen. But I'm saying that's what's happened in the past years, where everything has lined up pretty close to where we're at today. Now, the problem with that? Oh, it's another yes. What was that, 2000. Same thing. Whole bunch of nothing. Nothing hit us. This is the problem with it. Like he was talking about 1992. Hurricane Andrew, an A-named storm in August of that year. First storm of the year was in August 26th of 1992. So it only takes one. You know, they're going to 5.8 storm. Look, it just takes one. It don't matter whether they predict 12 or they predict 42. It just takes the one to come here. That's the problem with what I showed you a little while ago. But I'm trying to say is history, if history repeats itself, we might be in pretty good shape this year. I'm going to vote for that right now and just hope, you know, next year I'm going to stand up here and they're going to go, man, you were crazy. Get out of here. You were wrong. But y'all might say you might have had something there. But, you know, we lean on Roger a lot. He'll figure out things like that for us. We just got to kind of lay it out and let him do the research because that's what they do. I mean, they live this every day. They don't live this during June 1st to November. It's every day. That's what they do. That's why they're good at, I think they're good at what they do. I appreciate what they do. And they do get criticized a little bit for being off. But just think about all the dynamics that go into trying to predict where these things are going to go. And I will say that I asked him at lunch, a 3-day forecast, cone. That's not I'm talking about the cone is 62%? 62% always in the cone. I thought it was higher than that. But still in all, that gives you a pretty good idea. And if you recall, Ida, you know, it was kind of leaning toward us, and then that last day, it boomed, it jumped back over to the west. So we were fortunate, there's no question. But, you know, again, we really depend on these guys, and I will promise you, whatever he sends me, if your name is on that list with an email address, Miss Janet will send it to you every time we get it from him, so you can get it direct. And then call us if you want us to come meet individually with your groups, and we'll try to, you know, get specific with everybody. But we appreciate y'all coming back. Thanks y'all for putting it together, and thank y'all for giving us the opportunity to be in here for a hurricane. You know, like I said, we split up between here and Franklin. I send Jimmy to Franklin because I'm the boss. I can come here, see? So it works out pretty good for me. Okay. Thank you, Mac.
Our next speaker is going to be Mike Mercado with the St. Mary Levee District.
I hope David didn't just jinx us with his predictions for the year.
It's history.
It has been active over the past, what, 5 or 6 years. It's been a bit nuts. Just some updates from the Levee District as far as what additional protection has gone into place. As you can see here, this is our district map. The only thing that does not exist on this map is the stuff west of Hanson Canal on the south end. That's future projects. We are fortunate in St. Mary Parish that we have these miles and miles of levee due to the Corps of Engineers and the Mississippi River and Tributaries Project. And we get to utilize them for two things, the riverine as well as for hurricane storm protection. The good part about it is the Corps came in. One of our weak points was right here at Highway 317. The Corps came in 2 years ago, I guess now, and finished up a gap closure right there between the systems. So that's no longer an issue. One of the things you did see on Roger's map was the, I'll call it the Berwick-Patterson area. I think y'all now have Morgan City hatched out. I don't think Franklin and all of that is done yet. That system's not closed. But I think someone else said it, that we are protected. We're well protected. We have a lot of confidence in our levees, and we're working on closing those last gaps that are there. This is a newer project that was completed last year and actually utilized twice for Ida and early storm last year. I don't remember which one that was. But this basically blocks off the junction between Hanson Canal and Bayou Teche going eastward. There's been historical flooding along Bayou Teche back there from storm surges. So we were able to utilize that. And then this is the last gap in that system from Wax Lake Outlet to Hanson Canal is what we call a Yoakley extension. This we are hoping to be complete late June, early July. The project itself is near completion. What you see here is the foundation for a removable flood wall that ties into earthen levees. The removable flood wall portion of it is coming from Germany, so there's a long lead time. We're hoping late June that stuff will be delivered and this will be operational. In the past 5 years, we've had to utilize HESCO baskets to close off the area along Industrial Road. And numerous times over the past 5 years, that temporary protection has been put to the test. So that one's going to be complete. That'll close that entire loop to roughly about 10.5 feet. We got a little bit of work to do on the federal system south of Franklin, south of Centerville. But for all practical purposes, we're in great shape as far as it goes. Franklin Canal was installed in 2013 to protect, basically the center of the city of Franklin. Has 4 pumps on this because it is a closed system. Once it's closed down, you got to be able to get that water out. The city and the fire department in Franklin help us operate this one. Another one is Hanson Canal, installed by the parish using hazard grant mitigation funds. This blocks off Hanson Canal flowing into the Tesh. Again, part of that closing that loop. And then the Yellow Bayou structure. This in previous years, I want to say maybe Ike and Gustav, was the cause of flooding on Highway 90. So this closure helps prevent that as well. And then, of course, in Morgan City, you got the backwater protection that's being is installed and is being upgraded. The LA 70 section has been completed all along the lakefront, down through Auburn, out to the lake on Justice Street, and then, of course, the Syracusaville. The only gap we currently have is the lakefront and lakeside, and we're working towards a project right there. So again, our system, this is the western side of it. So we're in a hurricane conference, so we're going to discuss basically the south levees. The ones on the north aren't impacted that greatly. Those levees on the north side, again, are riverine, so they're much taller. You're looking at anywhere between 18 and 22 feet. On the south side, what we're working towards is the FEMA elevations, which north of the intercoastal are roughly about 10.5 feet. So all of this stuff for FEMA purposes need to be at least 10.5 feet. There's a relatively small linear footage that will be below that 10.5 feet. This is the Berwick-Patterson area. Again, this is hatched out in the National Weather Service modeling. This is not, and it does cause problems sometimes because they send out their slosh models that show 9 feet of water in the center of Franklin, and that's not necessarily the case. So just be aware of that whenever you're looking at some of this stuff. And then, of course, the Morgan City area. One thing you don't see on here, let me see what else, is Bayou Chene. Bayou Chene will be dedicated and is currently operational. It will be dedicated next week. It is not a hurricane structure. It is a riverine structure. Will it be used in a case of a hurricane? It's very possible. In 2019, when was Barry? 19? 2019, we had a temporary structure on Bayou Chene. Hurricane Barry came through, and the structure proved to help. So currently, we're always learning, obviously. That's why we collect so much data after these hurricanes. Currently, what we're thinking is anything west of the Atchafalaya River, we'll close it. Part of the problem is it's not a fast closure. It's not like these other structures I've showed you that can be closed anywhere between 15 minutes and 2 hours. It takes 10 hours to close that structure, and a good bit of money at that. So we're going to closely monitor that and make decisions basically on the fly, depending on where these hurricanes are coming. Goes back to, something else. We get honed in. A lot of times we get honed in on a line for these hurricane predictions, and just the difference that 15 or 20 miles makes. For instance, last year for Ida, 15 or 20 miles this way, it's a completely different ballgame for St. Mary Parish. And we got to be cognizant of that. We have to be aware of that. Know that the Levee District, like Roger said, he wakes up, first thing he does during hurricane season, what you looking at? National hurricane models. What's in store for today? And the minute they start coming out with information, we start looking at models. We start figuring out where do we need to respond, what do we need to do, and it basically runs through the entire storm. And then after that, we're out collecting data. We collect high water marks, rack lines. We want that for the next storm so that we know what we're dealing with.
So is there a specific threshold or standard that you all are going to use to determine when you close that structure and invest those resources?
So The structure is permitted for an Atchafalaya River flood, 7-foot elevation and rising on the gauge.
That's the standard.
That's the permit, yes. Now, for storms coming, and for instance, I'll use last year as an example. We had a high river. It wasn't terribly high here. What did we get to last year? Was it 6.5? Yeah, it wasn't an issue here. But north of us, east of the Atchafalaya Basin, it wouldn't stop raining. And the problem was when the river hits, say, 3.5, 4, Bayou Chenier starts flowing north. That's the only outlet for all of that water coming down out of that basin. So would we have closed it last year if it was available? It's very possible, because we know it would have helped out that area to alleviate some of the flooding that they had. So yes, we're held to a permit, but you know, you got to do what's best in the interest of people. And you know, one thing, our executive director Tim Mott, he said this many times: levees are here to protect infrastructure, to protect homes, not lives. If it's time to get out, I know for Ida last year, I called all my family and said, get out. It's too close. Don't take a chance. Get out.
I've read your permit and for the Bayou Chenier, and when you talk about 7 feet, the permit does have the correlating NAV 88.
NAV D88, yes, ma'am.
And so for me, the little guy on the street, when you speak of 7 feet, and that is what goes out in the publications, it's difficult to relate to, because you really mean to me, when I look at your gauge, 5.75 if I remember right, NAV 88, or am I incorrect?
Okay, so that 7 feet is the Corps of Engineers Morgan City gauge.
Right.
And the reason, so yes, I understand your plight. We use NAV D88 as well, because I know if you tell me it's going to be 10 feet NAV D88, I know in NAV D88 what the elevation of my levees are. Whereas we still have to utilize those core gauges, because sills on gates, things like that are all set to that, I think it's mean low Gulf. Or
Most of them will have that adjustment on it.
yes, and the gauges do have the adjustment.
The adjustment, yeah.
But for the public, when you pull up the gauge, you're looking at that gauge reading. Don't correct it. According to our permit, 7 feet and rising, based on that gauge. And we threw in the NAVD 88 so that, you know, engineers would know.
I mean, at 7 feet, there's a lot of flooding going on, but at NAV 88, it's
Think of the 7 feet. It's the same, but
they're
different.
the same.
It's the same, but different, yes.
Sounds better the other way.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Right.
All right, our next speaker would be the Corps of Engineers.
They haven't notified me. Is anyone from the Corps on the line? Tim Canal?
Leave down or talk.
Okay.
Give him the mic.
Cam, I'm hanging up.
Okay, I'll tell you what, maybe they'll call back in, but we're going to go ahead and go to the U.S. Coast Guard. Commander, come on up.
Ben Russell. Thank you. Good afternoon. So, Coast Guard in Morgan City has been here since 1978, when we were known as the Morgan City Port Safety and Security Office. And we had 6 coasties at that time, not running traffic at that time, but they were helping out on the waterways. And we've grown to 70 plus active duty and civilian responders. Our primary mission here is to manage the vessel traffic service, which enacts the Ports and Waterway Safety Act, and that basically is to operate the safe navigation of the marine transportation system. So I'm going to, my colleague here, Lieutenant Commander Select Gibson, she is my inbound prevention department head, and she's going to talk about Ida somewhat, but I'm going to steal some of her thunder here a little bit. So we live in this building with Mac here, and it's an incredible benefit to us because with the strongest of storms coming in, we have an operational presence here. So I have 140 dependents and family members married to the good women and men of the Coast Guard here, and they evacuated. And most of us stayed, and we stayed right here in this building, and we managed traffic pre-storm and post-storm. And that's the plan going forward, is that we have a stay team that the night before, the morning of, we kiss our spouses and our children goodbye. We send them on the road. We check into Morgan City. We open up our cots or our offices with our pillows, and we start working our 24-hour-7 operations. That's what we did for Ida. The day before Ida, with close coordination with 3 other VTSs in the area and several Army Corps lockmasters, within several hours we moved 250 commercial vessels out of harm's way up into the greater Mississippi area. Immediately post-Ida, there was a critical need to open up the waterway to commercial vessels, in particular industrial vessels, with dredges, with construction cranes, with heavy vessels that could move things out the water. And so we had an inspection workload increase of upwards of 400%. And we were working these terribly long days, inspecting these vessels, getting them ready to do that good work so we could actually open up the Gulf to the Mississippi River. And we did that within 72 hours in general, and then completely within a week. Fushan had some particular issues, and so there's a long-term management issue there. And Morgan City, I think it was mentioned, but I'll use some maritime terminology. Morgan City served as the anchor for the Coast Guard response during post-Ida. And my people live all over St. Mary. They live all over the region, all over the local 5 parishes. And 70% of them lost their homes, were evacuated, and were actually made homeless. And we had to find a place for them to live and to work. And the good people of Morgan City, and I'll give the good mayor a particular shout out here, opened up their hearts to us, and they put us up in the auditorium. And at the height of our operation, we had 250 coasties in there, working across the region for more than 45 days, trying to open up Fushan to the Mississippi. And it eventually came open, and it couldn't have happened without the incredible support and partnerships that you guys gave us. Incredibly welcoming. I appreciate that all. We're here again. We have a good plan. We've learned as well. We think we've improved our pre-storm preparations. Mike, I'm going to use some of your data on levees so I can encourage my people to live in St. Mary Parish. You know, so I have a lot of youngsters that work for me, and Walk-Ons is a very appealing restaurant, and that's in Houma. But I think the Levee District has done a good job of making this a safe place to live, and so it's a privilege to work here and live here. My children go to Patterson High School, Middle School, and Hattie Watts, and it's an incredible neighborhood. But I'll turn it over to Haley, who's the real operator here, and just thank you all for your opportunity.
Good afternoon, all. We are happy and proud to serve here in Morgan City. Commander touched on it, but this is just what our particular unit is made up of. We have operational specialists who are running BTS Berwick Bay, running traffic 24/7 in every port condition. We have our marine science technicians who are in charge of any pollution concerns or facility inspections that could happen pre or post storm. And we have our marine inspectors and investigators who are trying to prevent and then are also responding to any marine casualties. Also, in support of the coasties here, we have health service technicians and yeomen that make sure our paperwork and our pay and our health needs are all taken care of. These are some of the things that we're going to be enforcing pre-storm, some important topics to always remind your companies and constituents. General vessel and barge mooring during heavy weather. So our job is to promote the safe navigation and protection of vital infrastructure. We're mandated to do that by Congress in the Code of Federal Regulations. So we are enforcing that no person can secure a vessel or barge to a tree or other vegetation. If they are secured to another vessel or barge to barge, they have to have it by secure lines, no frayed lines or other defective mooring, and the regulations on how they have to particularly be secured to one another to prevent situations like you see there on the right. Some more detail on the regulations of what we are enforcing and inspecting post-storm. These are the port conditions that you can expect to see from the Coast Guard as we are approaching a storm. We'll set port condition whiskey when we are 72 hours out from an anticipated gale force wind of 34 knots, 39 miles per hour. And then subsequently X-ray is when we're 48 hours away from that, Yankee 24, and Zulu 12. And I'll go through each port condition and what you can expect from the Coast Guard. So please ignore the hurricane symbol weather mark. I think it's supposed to be a solid red, right? I just learned that from the Weather Geeks presentation. But it shouldn't have a hole in it, correct? Sure, that's a tropical storm. It should be a solid red, so ignore that. But this is port condition whiskey. We are still open to all commercial traffic at this time. When we're 72 hours out, we're still open. At this point, you'll see the captain of the port starting to collaborate with our stakeholders and our government agencies, and we'll be issuing out an MSIB, a Marine Safety Information Bulletin, notifying the marine traffic in the area that if you're over 500 gross tons, you need to have a plan and it needs to be approved by us if you're planning to remain in the area. Worst case scenario is loose barges and vessels that are unmanned and floating down a raging river, and they get stuck or hard aground, and now we've stopped the marine transportation system. Even when the storm is over, we can't get the emergency vehicles that we need to support recovery. We'll be increasing harbor patrols and facility inspections just to observe that people are doing and enacting their heavy weather plans. And we'll be notifying the public. That's another big effort on the Coast Guard pre-storm, is notifying the public. We leverage GEICA, the Gulf Intercoastal Canal Association. They're a huge partner in that, is getting the information and the closures and the predictions of what we're going to have to do out to the mariners. When we enter X-ray, we're 48 hours out, we're still open to commercial traffic. At this time, though, we are continuing to notify mariners and go through checklists. We're also individually assessing vessels that are asking to stay in port as safe refuge. We're assessing their plan. Is that safe? How's that going to affect other vessels or industries in the area? We're also inspecting wharfs and pier areas and talking to representatives about their weather plan. Now we're at Yankee, we're 24 hours out. This is where the captain of the port is going to start putting vessel control measures in effect. We're going to start telling people that you have to either get out or stay put or go certain places of safe refuge. If they haven't enacted their plan yet, we're going to get more involved at this point. Red flag barges carrying cargo of particular hazard are going to be highly encouraged to leave. If they are allowed to stay in the port, we're going to have a very good reason why, and it'll have to be captain of the port approved, the captain level. and now we're at port conditions Zulu. We are less than 12 hours expecting landfall. We're continuing to enforce vessel control measures and likely increase them. The default for Zulu is to close the waterway completely, no movement. The captain of the port does reserve the authority, though, to make any conditions, any concessions to that he feels are in the best interest of the port. Generally, at Zulu, this is when transits even within the port are held, and no mooring or anchoring that hasn't been pre-planned. Also, obviously, we're suspending cargo operations, again, unless specifically allowed for good cause. This is probably our biggest moment is after the storm. It's when we have the most work to do. I would like to add that we're not a search and rescue unit, but this area is covered by Sector New Orleans. So the assets, air and vessel assets will surge the area post-storm, and we will be here to service the community. But Marine Safety Unit Morgan City doesn't necessarily have those units attached here year-round, but we are supported by Sector New Orleans. So Marine Safety Unit Morgan City will be doing the following. We'll be conducting maritime damage and risk assessments and emphasizing channels, bridges, and piers. We're going to be organizing a port condition team conference call with all of you good people, letting you know what we're at, what we're thinking, what's safe, what's not safe. And then mainly we're going to be assessing the restriction of vessel movements. How quickly can we lift these restrictions? Are the navigation channels safe? Post-survey, we're reviewing surveys and we're declaring them safe for the mariners to continue and move on and start recovery efforts. And Commander touched on this. This is just Hurricane Ida recap, some of our numbers. I would like to point out the wonderful relationship that we've had with Army Corps of Engineers and the Gulf Intercoastal Canal, helping us to clear the channel and allowing us their assets to do post-storm recovery and surveys so that we could get that information up to the high levels of the Coast Guard, the decision makers, and that really sped up the reopening of the marine transportation system. And my last plug is for the most up-to-date information from the Coast Guard, the Homeport website. I'm sure most of you have the link, but if not, you can literally Google Coast Guard Homeport, and it will pull you up to our main website where you click on port, the home on captain of the port, which we fall under. And it will have your marine safety bulletins, the maritime hurricane contingency plan, and the Berwick Bay user manual. Also, always subscribe to our free .gov delivery service for the most up-to-date Coast Guard information, and those are our best contact numbers. And we are all three here open, ready for questions, if you have any for the Coast Guard. Anything to add, Commander? No? Okay. All right.
Thank you. Cindy, is it Corps? Did anybody call from the Corps?
No, I texted him.
Okay.
He must have gotten tied up with the...
Sorry, we couldn't get a hold of the Corps today,
We
but
have the lock operators here.
LaDon, I did not put her up to that. She did that on insubordinate. She did that on purpose. I'll tell you what, we're almost out of time, but we got, do any of the city officials, Lee, you got any comments? We got city officials, we got parish officials. Does anybody want to make a comment, ask any questions?
So I think I know everybody here. We had everybody had a horrible time of communications right after this storm. What we did find out, we went old school, dug out the radios out of the box, tried to get most of the batteries working, and we were able to get back to be able to communicate. If not, we had to put multiple people in one cop car just for safety, right? Because they couldn't talk to each other. So I'm just saying, we went out and bought a bunch of more old school radios for our city employees so where we can communicate, because we know this high-tech system is junk whenever this happens.
So what was it? You had something you put on the phone. What was that?
Oh, it was a hotspot.
A hotspot.
Worked great. Perfect. Got it from John from the police department. Worked great. They couldn't get in touch with me because I was running a Bobcat, cleaning up the roads. They said, we need to talk to the mayor. They gave me a hotspot and my damn phone started working. That's something y'all should think about. You know, it wasn't AT&T. It was Verizon, I think, John? Verizon? Yeah. Yeah, worked really good. I think
we had service in the building, but if you walked outside, the minute you walked outside, it died. But with that hotspot thing, you had service.
Yeah, everywhere. Just stick it in your pocket. So all I'm saying is every municipality or parish should think about that. Just so happens our police department has them, so they gave us a couple to use. The old school radios work great, you know, but we got rid of all of them and threw them away. Most of them got rid of all of them. So we went back and bought some more for, our police department had them. I think a lot of batteries will need to be changed, but we were able to get by, you know, but like you said, that first net, whatever, didn't work. You know, it was horrible. So be thinking way ahead right now about them radios, because they did work once we got them. Once we got them online and running, they worked good. So that's all I want to say.
Appreciate it. Anybody from the parish or anybody got any other comments? Sarah, you got any comments for Senator Kennedy for us?
Show us the money.
Well, it's very great to hear from everyone, state, local, and federal level. And we'll definitely give Senator Kennedy a good update on everything that's happening down here.
These are our two DC staffers in town this week, so bring them around and meet everybody.
Thank you very much for being here. Lauren, I see you trying. You thought you were going to hide back there, but
I said the cookies are great.
I was giving you a minute.
I look forward to them every year. But so for us, from the federal standpoint, I know whenever a storm hits, there's a ton going on. Everyone's phones are blowing up until they stop working. So we don't want to bug y'all, but just know that we're here. We come in on the back front. We're happy to support. Most people here have my cell phone number, but if you don't, Max, Siggy, both have it. Yeah.
Thank you again for being here. Senator Cassidy, thank you. Captain Higgins, you got any closing comments? And before we wind down, we certainly do appreciate you being here. And we really do. It's an honor.
For all the government entities to know that as we prepare for the coming decade of storms, and as we become more resilient, the investment into the flood mitigation and hurricane preparedness and storm recovery that's staged prior to an actual storm event. These are the kind of projects that your congressional delegation will help with. Similar to the two letters I delivered to you today.
Yes.
Perhaps explain how you applied for a grant, and we support that effort and see it through to fruition. That has to be initiated by the government entity itself, by your municipalities, your parish, your cities, etc.
Yes. Clay, we're going to do one thing too. In the videos, I think it was Tim, when you're showing the med stations out there. Morgan City has one in Berwick. We've got the Emerald Pass. Then the port has two out there. Clay was asking who pays for those things. Well, Clay said the government ought to be funded. I mean, the government's using the information. Roger needs that information. So we will be following up with Clay's office and with the Senator's office, because we pay a lot of money for those things. NOAA gave us the funding to put them in, but that funding was used up, and we had maintenance on it for about 3 years. First 3 years was taken care of, and since then it's been out of our pocket. That's a lot of money, but it is a vital resource when you need it. And for about 5 to 6 months out of the year, guarantee you need it with the storms out there. So glad we will be. Thank goodness you were here to see that, because you asked who's paying for that. I was glad to hear you ask that.
So the Louisiana delegation.
The Met stations, when they show the Met stations, those yellow platforms offshore, we have two of them, one about 15 miles, well no, that's more than that, about 15 miles from here, and then one about 18 miles further south out in the Gulf.
So Matt was saying, just basically use this as an example, guys. The port pays for maintenance for those things, and I think the port should be able to access federal money to at least offset the expense for maintenance for that. It's used by the federal government. It's just common sense. So just please know, as you go back to your communities and your duties and obligations, and you look at where the intersections are for all of us at the local, state, and federal level to prepare for incoming storm events that impact our communities, and we have to deal with them and recover. And yeah, we're good at it because we're South Louisiana. It's in our DNA. However, the better prepared we can be by having strong infrastructure and robust communications with layers of response capabilities that allow us to both prepare for an incoming storm, weather the storm as it passes, and then quickly communicate well and be on the ground recovering. So as you go back to your duties and responsibilities in your community, you communicate within your chain of command. Just know that the Louisiana delegation, all the congressional offices and both senators' office, when it comes to Louisiana being prepared for a storm and recovering for a storm, there's no daylight, there's no politics, there's none of that. We're going to stand shoulder to shoulder and help you. So when it comes to the specifics, the mechanisms that we have at our within the parameters of our authority to specifically help you with seeking funding, that comes down to working together with our delegation colleagues and getting across the board support for a particular application that you have pending. Like I gave Mac 2 letters of congressional support on a couple of things that the port is attempting to seek funding for through 2 different federal programs. They'll very likely get that money. It begins with the application and then communicating with your delegation so that we can officially support that application and make it happen. So I thank both senators' offices for being here today. I'm honored to serve, and thank you, Madam, for coordinating and facilitating this. I have to say that I'm disappointed that FEMA's not here. And I know that there was an attempt to get FEMA, and it's an important component that we have to work with.
Usually we do local people, but I think that your recommendation we need to do this next time, perhaps have someone here to hear.
Oh, I stand corrected then. So
Okay.
so FEMA perhaps could be included as we move forward.
Sure.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
David, you could line up. Don't they have a state rep and a national rep and everything? You work real close. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
We'll do that.
Thank you, ma'am.
They're here.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mac, I have a FEMA question.
Yes.
I've heard this from my people in Calcasieu here, and I'm wondering if y'all can give me input for this region, for St. Mary, from constituents and residents of Calcasieu after a storm. They've said that in the past there was a FEMA person that was delegated to helping them navigate, the FEMA process after the storm, but then that was done away with. Do y'all find that people have trouble with that after a storm here? And Congressman, just to bring to your awareness, I know Senator Cassidy is aware of this, but that there was specifically, I forgot what it was called, but it was a regional FEMA person that was designated to go out and be that person for the region and help people that were affected. Do y'all find that that would be helpful to have that reinstated?
Lauren, hold up just a second. Clay, y'all.
Okay. Okay,
What-
because they told us in Calcasieu, oh, yes.
I will say this, and I hope y'all can hear what we're saying. We are still, to this day, fighting for reimbursements from Laura and Delta.
Yes.
And Barry.
Yes.
And flood of 2019. It's not a good situation. It hasn't been, and the process has not gotten any easier. We end up spending a substantial amount of money to have someone manage just the portion of FEMA. And look, we're not bragging, but we're good at it because we've done it so many times, and I'm talking about the Levee District. We've done it so many times with the flood events and things like that. So we know the process. We make sure up front that we follow all the steps to do it properly. And it is a battle every event.
That's a good point. What the gentleman is saying, let me just clarify that of the 10 parishes, 755,000 constituents that I serve, you have many government entities. Your police jurors here, your parish president there, municipalities, towns, and your sheriff's offices, and there tends to be a great clarity between the performance of these government entities as it regards accessing federal monies for reimbursement, and where you find a common thread woven of success versus struggle is not the devotion of the people, or the spirit that drives them. They're all great people, but your most successful government entities, as it regards to navigating through the federal bureaucracies, is when you have somebody specifically trained on how to access and apply, and then the communications with your congressional office so that we can get involved and have and communicate directly with that what we call the alphabet agency or department that's controlling your reimbursement, let's say FEMA reimbursement for say debris removal. If you communicate with us that you have the specific application pending and you feel that it's appropriate for us to get involved, we jump right in. We jump right in within a couple of business days. We have official communications with that entity, with say FEMA, for that particular application that's pending. And what that does, ladies and gentlemen, it moves you from this file of pending applications to this one. You know, you get attention from that alphabet agency or department for that application. Why? It shouldn't be that way. Correct? I mean, the federal government should just perform, but reality is the bureaucracy is so thick. What we want to do is we want to penetrate that insulation that's between our citizenry and the government bureaucracy that should be serving you properly. We want to penetrate through that with some official attention. And I say again that the assistance, the cooperative effort of our delegation, your Louisiana delegation, it always performs shoulder to shoulder when it comes to disaster preparation, recovery, and like flood mitigation projects. So if any of you have applications for reimbursement that are languishing, please, I beg of you to communicate that specific concern with our office. We will jump right on it. I don't mean to speak for the senators' offices, but I've watched them perform with us shoulder to shoulder, and I feel confident in telling you that your Louisiana delegation will immediately respond. So we knock those out one by one, and you know, millions here and millions there, and your cities and parishes, your levee districts get reimbursed for monies so that they can move forward within their budget that they have appropriated to perform for the community they've sworn to serve. So let us help you by communicating. Please communicate with us a specific concern, something that should have been reimbursed by now and has not been, and we will jump on it, and my office won't be alone. We'll have both senators will help, and our colleagues across the state will will join in that effort.
And Congressman,
We always get them
I
done.
can attest to the success of your office doing that.
And to echo off of that, I mean, I myself have done a lot of FEMA casework because we were so inundated with just small claims, people trying to get reimbursed for chainsaws, and also major issues that they were having with storm damage. So I've been actually helping our casework as well. So our office is more than welcome to help out in any way that we can.
And to be honest, as the outside observer with Roger and I, it really, you've done heroic strides to cut through so much of what we ourselves see when we're out there. I mean, one of the things that just is striking is how a Fouche on a Bayou could get FEMA mission assignments and authorizations to clean up their bayou, and then we go to a meeting in Grand Isle, and they're not even close to even getting FEMA to even recognize it. And how a precedent that's set for Bayou Lafourche cleanup somehow is totally void of anything that's being FEMA's considering of Grand Isle. And it really is your efforts, all the congressional delegates, that's helping actually cut through so much of this when the local, a local parish government that's actually just trying to get on its feet from a hurricane is trying to get through the paperwork. It's almost as worse as the hurricane.
Yeah, you got to have, listen, the bureaucracies, I'm no fan of big federal bureaucracies. I think that's clear. But the reality is they exist. So please use our office as the point of the spear to penetrate through that. Well, I'm telling you, within what, Colonel, one business day, 2 business days, if you request a letter of congressional support for opinion application, and your application is squared away, I'm telling you, we're going to respond very fast. And I don't know of one that has been rejected. You, Colonel?
We've been very successful.
I'm telling you, we've done 200 or 300 of these things, and every one of them, those folks get their money. So please use us for that. If your application is squared away and it's being delayed by the bureaucracies that some of us fight against, you will find us very responsive and effective in helping you get that money back where it belongs.
And that means that you have my information, so feel free to reach out to me.
Listen, on behalf of the Port of Morgan City, I want to thank all our speakers for being here today. All I can say is thank you for today, but go ahead and start preparing for next year because we'll be right back here again next year. But thank you, everybody, for coming out today. Really want to thank y'all. Appreciate it.